Hello, everybody. Welcome. Tonight on Kidney Stories 2, our guest is kidney transplant warrior, an organ donation advocate, and two-time preemptive transplant recipient, a first for our show, Tom Ottman. In 1997, Tom was diagnosed with FSGS. The first hint of ESRD came from a routine annual physical. Tom managed to avoid dialysis for the next 16 years before the first of his two preemptive kidney transplants by eating a sensible kidney-friendly diet and exercise. In 2011, he was put on a kidney transplant list, and after 2.5 years, he was transplanted. He did face many obstacles to transplant, including 6 false emergency calls before getting transplanted, including one admission and discharge because the donor kidney was, quote unquote, not ideal. On November 17th, 2013, he received his first kidney transplant. He faced many challenges after his transplant, including proactive testing, reactive procedures, and medication adjustments. The first kidney transplant lasted 7 years, as the kidney slowly lost function over time due to transplant glomerulopathy. Once he hit GFR of 20, he was referred back to a transplant center for an evaluation on a second transplant. In March of 2000, he was once again approved for the transplant list, but he was placed on an inactive status due to a pulmonary hypertension. His doctor suggested dialysis to remove the excess fluid caused in order to get on the active list, but Tom refused. With a healthier diet, he lost 20 pounds, alleviating the pH and placing him after retesting on the active, ready-to-be transplanted list. After 6 months, he got the call in September of 2020. Tom accepted a high-risk hepatitis C antibody kidney because Hep C is now curable. To date, he's had no signs of Hep C. He had his second preemptive kidney transplant on September 17th of 2020. Tom has faced some difficulties since his second kidney transplant. His labs showed signs of rejection in November of 2000, and at the same time, they also showed the presence of the BK virus. This is challenging because the treatment for rejection requires that you are highly immunosuppressed, while the treatment for the BK virus requires you not to be immunosuppressed at all, so the body can fight it off. So, after 8 infusions of thymoglobulin and solomedrosteroid, the rejection episode seemed to be over. 50 plus infusions of Covidar and 12 infusions of capital I, small letter G, or Privigen, a human blood product containing antibodies. Tom may have very well beaten the BK virus as well. He also suffers from a dropped foot. Tom has been a very, very active kidney advocate. His activities are listed in the comments. He is particularly well known for his comprehensive advice to kidney transplant list candidates, also listed in the comments. Please give a warm welcome to our friend, Tom Ottman. Start the show, Jared. Tom, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm pleased to be invited here tonight.
Oh, glad to have you. Glad to have you. Besides the bad pronunciations for the complicated medical terms, did I state everything correctly in the introduction?
That was an excellent synopsis. I don't have to do anything now.
Please tell us a little bit about how and where you grew up, your background, education, prior employment, and what you currently do.
I grew up in a little town in New York State in Westchester County called Pound Ridge. It's just like Mayberry, USA. Everybody knew everybody, small town. Wonderful place to grow up. But I needed a change. And so I went to Miami, Florida to attend the U. And I graduated from there in 1974 and got my degree as a BBA, Bachelor of Business Administration. Stayed there 15 years. I worked most of my career in the payment processing industry, most notably with Barnett Bank Telecheck. Loved that job. They're the ones who transferred me up here to North Carolina, where I've been ever since. Been here well over 30 years now. And I worked for First Data, and I worked for RBC Bank Monera Solutions, which is the company I retired from. So it's been a fun career, but I'm glad to be retired now and happy to have all the free time I need to attend to my health needs and also have a little bit of fun along the way.
Excellent. I understand that you were diagnosed with FSGS in 1997. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yes, and you did mention in the introduction that it was uncovered in a routine physical. So I do want to emphasize the value of getting your annual routine physical faithfully. I just happened to be starting with a brand new internal medicine doctor. And so he asked the usual questions to get to know you and learn about your family history. Uncovered that my father had also had kidney disease. He passed away in 1976. We do not know exactly what type of kidney disease he had back then. I don't know that they really could hone in on that as good as they can now. He did spend about a year on dialysis, did not do well on it. And I was determined that I was never going to go on dialysis if I could help it. And I did everything have been able to do to avoid it. And so far I've been able to avoid it 2 times. Thank God for that.
Okay. You mentioned that you're avoiding dialysis. You were able to avoid dialysis for 16 years after your diagnosis by eating a sensible kidney-friendly diet and exercise. Can you tell us a little bit about how you did that?
Yes, and again, that's the value of the routine physical because it was caught early. And when you catch kidney disease early, there's many things you can do to prolong your good health and stay off dialysis and do much better and be in better condition physically when the time does come for transplant. So over the 16 years, I lived a pretty normal life. I didn't always eat as healthy at the beginning of those 16 years as I did at the end of those 16 years. When I really started getting serious about the diet was in 2011, when I actually got put on the transplant list. Now, that's when it really hits you. That's when you know, oh, this is real, this is serious. And that's when I really started adhering to the kidney-friendly diet. I call it the taste bud unfriendly diet, really strictly. I really stayed with it. And I'm convinced in my mind that it really made the difference in prolonging every last little bit of kidney function I still had just long enough. I got my transplant just in the nick of time, just long enough to avoid dialysis.
You mentioned that.
Exercise is real important too. I really got into cycling, and I rode my bicycle on a number of charity events, and set a goal to get fit enough and well enough where I could ride over the Ravenel Bridge in Charleston, South Carolina, if anyone's familiar with that. That was so much fun accomplishing that goal. It's such a view from up top. Oh my God. And I was pretty proud of myself for that. But I was in pretty good shape the day that I had my transplant. That's really important.
Excellent. Talk to us a little bit about what transplant center you were working with in 2011.
I got my transplant at Carolinas Medical Center, now part of Atrium Health here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay. And you waited 2.5 years or so for your transplant, is that correct?
It took 2.5 years active on the waiting list until I got my kidney. That's a relatively short period of time. I'm an A positive blood type. My kidney center tells me that at their center, A positives tend to get transplanted sooner than other blood types. So I can take an A blood type, I can take an O blood type, which is the universal donor type. I want to mention one thing about getting a transplant too, in that a lot of people think it's a physical thing, but it's as much an emotional thing as it is physical. And right after the transplant, you feel a range of emotions. Of course, you're happy, you're elated, you're looking forward to a better quality life, a long life. You're just so happy. But at the same time, you feel sorrow and you feel grief for the donor and the donor family. And you feel guilt. I felt guilt that someone had to pass away so that I could live. And I felt guilt that I got my kidney in just 2.5 years. And there's so many other people who wait so much longer. And some people don't get transplanted at all, ever. So the way I'm dealing with that and have dealt with it is to just know that the donor and the donor family would have wanted me to go on, live a good life, do good things, be the best person I can be, and to give back. And so that's why I do what I do in the best ways I can. I believe we all have certain abilities, certain talents, certain resources. They're all different depending on who you are. But I think we need to use what skills we have, what abilities, what talents, and what resources we have to give back, get the word out on organ donation, and to help people along the way that are coming behind you and haven't yet experienced the things that I have already and are going through the same fears that I had and had to overcome.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced before transplant. False alarms, being there, being sent home. What happened?
My first transplant was relatively uneventful. And I started getting calls at about the 2-year mark of being active on the list. And I got them about every month until I finally got the final one and got my kidney. But people should expect that when they get a call, they may be an alternate or even a second alternate a time or two. So don't be freaked out when you get that call and then they call you back and say, well, it didn't happen. That's typical. Don't be concerned that it's something wrong. But on the third call, I was actually brought into the hospital. I was going to get the kidney. And I'm there being prepped. Had some tests, was getting pretty close to being ready for the operation. And my nephrologist walks in and he tells me, well, we've got a situation here. You need to make a decision. I got to make a snap decision, just like that. We could use the kidney, but we think maybe we might not. Maybe it's not a good idea. You're still in good physical shape. We believe it could still go a bit longer before you need dialysis. I did too. We think you can maybe wait a little bit longer if you choose. We'll give it to you now, but this kidney has about 7% scarring on it. So it may not be the best one for you. What do you want to do? Oh, boy.
Ouch.
Yeah. So I made a call to my primary nephrologist and talked it over with him. And of course, talked it over with my wife. And I decided to go home. Whether they use that kidney on somebody else who was more, for lack of a better word, desperate than I was, maybe they did. Maybe another transplant center might have felt better about the kidney than my transplant center. Or they may have thrown it away. I don't know.
Okay. Talk to us about November 17th, 2013, when you were back transplanted. What happened?
Transplant is, it's scary, but they put you to sleep and you wake up and you have a new kidney. I mean, it's really that simple for the transplantee. It's a lot harder on the loved ones waiting in the waiting room than it is on the transplantee. I had all the confidence in the world in my surgeons, who my surgeon and my nephrologist both happen to be University of Miami alumni. My first transplant, I have the typical hockey stick scar on one side. So I asked my surgeon, who's also a Miami Hurricane, you're going to put the other one on the other side, make a mirror image of that hockey stick. Now I've got a U scar on my stomach. Had to throw that in.
Okay.
So I did have some challenges with the second one. Well, the first one was easy. The recovery was pretty good. No issues with the recovery. I was pretty fit, so I healed real well. I was itching to get back on my bike within 60 days. Probably could have done it, but it would have been a little risky if I fell off or something or strained myself on the bike. So I waited the 90 days, got back on, started slow and built up again. Most people, if you work at home, like so many people do nowadays, thanks to COVID, you could probably go back to work right away. Typically, they're going to want you to stay out of work a month, 6 weeks, something like that, depending on what you do.
Okay.
So it was a fairly easy transplant, a fairly easy recovery. I was in and out of the hospital in 4 days. Fortunately, I had a loving, wonderful caretaker wife here at home to help me along the way and take care of me. And that's one thing that's really very important to you. You have to have a caretaker or a few to be there to take care of you, drive you to and from your labs. There's many labs right after transplant. They don't allow you to drive for a month. And that's one of the things they look at very carefully when they're screening you for the transplant list. You've got to have a support system. But yeah, the first transplant was pretty uneventful, went well. The recovery went well. Little to no pain, a little bit of achiness, a little bit of soreness, a little bit of numbness around the scar area. That was one thing that surprised me a little bit. But those are all typical. So if that happens to you, if you haven't been transplanted yet, those are things that you can expect, and they're perfectly normal. I never had any redness or anything like that. I healed pretty quick, and I was on my way for the next phase of my life. I had seen a sign in my transplant center advertising that there was a patient advisory council for transplant, and that got my attention, and I joined that. I became one of the 2 kidney organ transplant representatives, along with heart and liver and lung. And there was also an altruistic anonymous donor who was in that group as well, and another donor who gave to his wife. So it was a good, well-rounded group. We got a lot accomplished. I was really proud of that activity. And then one thing led to another. I started speaking, and now I'm here today.
Okay. It's my understanding the first transplant lasted 7 years and began to slowly lose function. Can you explain to us what happened there?
Mm-hmm. Of course, you have your labs very frequently right after transplant. For the first month, it's at least twice, sometimes 3 times a week. They just want to find any early signs of rejection or anything going wrong. As time goes on, the labs taper off to maybe once a month, once every 2 months, or something of that nature. So they discovered about maybe 3 years in that there was a little bit of loss of kidney function. The creatinine level was starting to go up a little bit. So they decided to give me a kidney biopsy. Once again, if this happens to you, that's fairly typical. In fact, in many cases, maybe all cases, you have a kidney biopsy after a year, just to see how it's doing. So they did the biopsy, and they did show some loss in function. They kept monitoring me over the next several years. We kept seeing the kidney function gradually go down little by little by little by little. The kidney biopsy showed scarring on the kidney. They didn't really know what was causing it. It could have been my initial FSGS coming back. It could have just been very slow rejection. They called it transplant glomerulopathy, which is a fancy way of saying your kidney's failing and we don't know why. So then after 7 years, my GFR hit 20%, and surprise to me, the doctor had already referred me to the transplant center once I hit that 20%.
Okay. It's my understanding that in March of 2000, you were approved for the transplant list and began accruing waiting time, but you were placed on the inactive list because of pulmonary hypertension. Can you tell us what went on there?
Yes. I was referred to the transplant center for the second time in January, and I was approved in early March. That's quick. Normally it takes 90 days, at least, if not longer, to go through the whole process and get approved. And I wanted to mention this because there's things you can do to help yourself along the way. One is being proactive. So having been through it once, plus having listened to the presentation when it's going through orientation, unlike some people, I knew what had to be done. I knew what tests were going to be given. The transplant center can schedule certain tests for you, but other ones are off-site or with non-hospital vendors, and you have to schedule them yourself or wait for the vendor to call you. So I made it a point that when it came time to make an appointment with somebody, if they said, "Can you make it at 7:00?" I'll get up early. I'll go 7:00. Can you make it at this location, which is 20 miles across town? Sure, I'll be there. I'll drive across town. Can you make it on Friday when I had maybe something fun scheduled instead? I'll be there Friday. Whatever it took, I would do it. No matter how inconvenient, no matter how early, no matter what else I had planned, I would be there. I would get it done. I would call them proactively if I could to see, hey, is there any way we can move this appointment up sooner? You had cancellation. I wanted to get all my appointments done and out of the way and get my case file sent over to the committee that makes the decision and get approved ASAP. Because the minute you're approved and you get that letter back from your transplant center, that's when you start accruing waiting time. I wanted to start accruing waiting time immediately. You gotta be proactive. You gotta make this happen for yourself. It'll happen, but there's things you can do to make it happen quicker. So I want to
be your own best advocate.
You have to be. You have to own your disease. You have to understand it. You have to know all about it. You have to be proactive. You have to listen. You have to ask questions. and you have to go after it. You have, just like anything else in life, that job you want, that girl you wanted to date, the fancy car you wanted to buy, you've got to go after it and you've got to make it happen.
Okay.
So I know I didn't answer your question. Maybe you can repeat it for me.
It's my understanding that in order to get rid of the fluid brought about by the pH, they suggested dialysis. It's also my understanding you refused. Can you talk about that a little bit?
They suggested that at some point when I needed to go on dialysis, I wasn't quite at that point yet, that by going on dialysis and removing fluid, that may relieve some of the pressure with the pulmonary hypertension and able to come down and me to be made active. But I didn't want to have to wait. I didn't want to have to go on dialysis. So I asked my nephrologist, what can I do? What can I do to make this happen? How can I be proactive? Well, we really think you probably need dialysis, need to lose the fluid. So I didn't like that answer. So I started researching. I thought, well, let me lose some weight. I was still about maybe 180 at that point or so. Come down from originally about 210. Partly through the cycling and all the exercising, eating healthy. You want to lose weight, go on a kidney-friendly diet. That'll do it. Because it's limiting and it's tasteless. But I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to stay off that dialysis. So I figured, let me do it. Let me lose the weight. And I did. I lost 20 pounds. I got down to around 160. Went back to my nephrologist, said, okay, I want to be retested. So I thought about it. Said, okay, I think, well, this guy's got pie in the sky wishes. It's not going to happen. Got retested. Lo and behold, when they first measured me, I was at 50. Their cutoff was 45. I got down to 38. Wow. So they approved me. I got my letter saying that I was approved. And a month later, one afternoon, I'm in the shower with the dog, giving the dog a bath. Lois comes running in with the phone. Here, it's a transplant center. I think, oh no, something's going wrong. What is it? It was the call. I was astounded. I could not believe that I got the call in that shorter period of time. But a lot of that had to do with maximizing my potential again, being proactive, increasing my chances by accepting what they call a high-risk kidney. It's really not, but they call it that. And hepatitis C had not too long ago been taboo. They would not transplant them at my transplant center. But they had started doing that. Now that hepatitis C is curable, and I had paid attention in class again and done my research and knew that this was really a pretty safe thing to do. The donor was a drug abuser, had passed away from a drug overdose. The kidney was perfectly healthy. It was a 40-year-old kidney, got a young kidney, good quality kidney, nothing wrong with it. Just the donor had abused drugs. I knew, again, through my experience and education, that they would not even offer it to you if it hadn't been run through all kinds of tests for everything and put on a pump, and they knew it was good. They knew it was functional. They knew it was going to last. So yeah, why not take a hepatitis C kidney? And that opened up a larger pool of potential donor kidneys for me. And I think that may have helped me along the way as well.
Okay. Transplanted in September of 2000. By November of 2000, labs showed that you were in kidney rejection, confirmed by a biopsy, also showed the BK virus. Can you tell us about the balancing act that went on between dealing with the rejection and dealing with the BK virus?
Yeah, the second time around, we knew going in that I'd be even more highly immunosuppressed than I was for the first transplant. because more antibodies have been built up in my body, and it's just the way it is. And so I had all those infusions of those drugs that you mentioned in the intro. Very, very powerful drugs. I had 9 infusions in the hospital before I went home. And then I had 2 of the same drugs, immunosuppressants that I had the first time around, but much higher doses. And they also added prednisone at a pretty high dose. And I was pretty zombied out there for a while. And it staved off rejection for a couple months. Then they started, of course, bringing down the dosages because they want to get you back at the normal level, the normal healthy level. Too much of all those drugs is not good either. So after a while, they started seeing the creatinine creep back up again, and it's not quite as alarming if it creeps up slowly as if it creeps up quick. And mine started creeping up quick. So, okay, another kidney biopsy. And sure enough, that confirmed the BK virus was there. Not a lot is known about that BK virus. It was the BK is the initials of the first patient that had it. It's something which everybody has, but a normal immune system will suppress it. I don't have a normal immune system, so it popped out. And the BK virus specifically will attack the kidney. The medication called cidofovir, which is infused, also attacks the kidney, but it attacks the virus too. So you can see what a balancing act it is. They have to give you a liter of saline before you get the cidofovir and then with the cidofovir. So they want to get it in you, let it do its thing, and flush it out of you quick. So it can help you and not harm you. I've had probably now closer to 60 of those infusions over the course of a little over a year. And my BK level at one point went up to 500,000 DNA copies. Unbelievable. The doctors, I think, were pretty pessimistic. But I stuck with it, went there every week, showed up on time, and went down to 250,000. Making progress. Went down to 50,000. Come on. Back up to 250,000. That's just the nature of it. They told me that might happen. It did. It's going to roller coaster up and down and up and down. Finally, we started to see regular, steady progress. And I got down to 2,100 at one point. That was roughly a month and a half ago. And they took me off the cidofovir, which I was very happy about. Now it started to creep up a little bit more. I'm at about 6,500 right now. So they're going to give me a different infusion now. I'm going to have four infusions starting Monday called IVIG or Privigen, Privigen. And that's a human hormone. It's a blood product. And not hormone, a human antibody. And it's derived from a human blood product. And that should give me antibodies to fight the BK. And hopefully that'll knock out the last little bit once and for all, and I'll be done with the BK. You mentioned in the introduction, I suffered from drop foot. Possibly that could be a complication from all the cidofovir. We don't know for sure. One of my nephrologists thinks it might be. Another's not sure. The neurologist doesn't really know. They can't tell me, but it seems coincidental in that a couple months after I started the cidofovir, I started getting these leg aches and nerve pains, and my foot started dropping. I can push down real good with my foot, but I can't pull my toes up, so it really interferes with walking. And the muscle weakness and nerve issues have affected my balance too. So that's been a complication after the second transplant. Whether it's directly related to the transplant or the cidofovir, we just don't know. May never know. But that's something I'm dealing with on top of everything else. I did have a short encounter with the CMV virus, we got rid of that. I took Valsite, and that did the job. That's gone. They monitor that every couple of weeks, and there's been no sign of that since. It acts very similarly to the BK in that the symptoms are like flu symptoms, and it can damage the kidney. So I've had those two complications to deal with. And of course, the kidney was damaged, of course, by the BK. My creatinine levels down to low twos, which is higher than you want it, but not horrible. If I can just keep it where it's at, I should be okay for probably for the rest of my life. But there's no guarantees.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about your kidney advocacy. I've listed the subject matters that you sent to me in the comments so people can see. Let's start with the NKF. What are you doing for the National Kidney Foundation?
I haven't worked for them lately because I've been dealing with my own health issues and taking care of myself. But the main thing that I did for them was to go to events. I remember one event where a table was set up at our AAA hockey team game here in Charlotte. And people would come in and mill around at halftime or before the game or after the game. And we'd have information there about organ donation and about transplant. And we'd try to talk to everybody that we possibly could and get the word out for the need for organ donation and overcome any myths or any fears or any misconceptions that people may have about becoming a donor. I have a friend who I hope is and probably is on this call listening in, Gary Simmons, who's done tremendous work creating something called Save a Life Group here in North Carolina. It raised tens of thousands of dollars for Life Share of the Carolinas. Now he's doing the same thing in South Carolina since he moved there. Helped out with that group a little bit, manning tables, getting the word out. I like talking to people, and I like sharing my experience, and I like sharing what knowledge I've gathered having gone through this process. So I do enjoy those sorts of things with the NKF and the Save a Life group.
Okay. You're part of a Carolina Medical Center support group. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
That support group has helped me an awful lot over the years. And I would say back in 2011 is when I started with it. I saw a sign in the transplant center. Thought I'd go ahead and see what it's all about. And there were a lot of people in that group at that time that were going through dialysis. I knew maybe someday I might need that. So I learned as much as I could from their experiences, learned about the different modalities, and they helped me overcome some of my fears. And they are the ones who motivated me more than anyone, even more than my nephrologist, to go ahead and get my fistula put in my wrist area before I ever needed it. I wanted to be proactive. Again, I didn't want to end up in an emergency situation with a port in my neck and a line going down into my heart. I wanted to be ready for dialysis if I needed it. So I had my fistula put in. It's still working great, although I've never needed to use it. Thank God for that. So that group was really helpful to me in that way. It was also helpful to me in another way in that it once again drove home to me that you always need to present your best self. And there was a lady that used to come to that group, 70 plus years old, frail as could be, had been through more health issues than you can imagine, breast cancer, colon cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, of course, kidney disease, dialysis, just as frail as can be. And she brought her husband with her to all the meetings. He was a 25-year stroke victim, shuffled along, could not talk, could understand. His mind was sharp, but he was physically impaired. And she was taking care of him and all his needs, all while going through all these things herself. And she would come to that meeting every single month, dressed like she's going to work. She worked at Saks Fifth Avenue in the jewelry counter. So, you got to look good to have that job at that place. And she'd come in her fancy dress and her hair perfect and the jewelry and the makeup perfect. And just such a wonderful lady. And I knew she felt terrible. And she was dragging her husband along with her and going through all these other things. But she always dressed so sharp and was so upbeat. And it just, it made everybody else feel better. And I asked her one day, why do you do this? I mean, we're in jeans and t-shirts and shorts and sandals. Why do you go to all the trouble of getting all fancied up like that? You look beautiful and your hair is wonderful, but why do you put yourself through that? She goes, well, when I look better, I feel better. And when I feel better, people react to me differently and they treat me better. And when they treat me better, that makes me feel even better. So I decided, that's a good idea. I'm always going to try to present my best self. And if I know I'm kind of going off the question, but if I could mention one other thing that drove that home is we pulled up to my nephrologist's office. My wife and I got out of the car. We're walking across the parking lot into the office and go in, get checked in, brought into the doctor's office, and we're sitting there waiting. And he walks in. He goes, oh, you're doing well today, aren't you? I went, wow, that was a quick 3 seconds looking in my eyes and skin to get initial first impression, see how I'm doing. And he goes, well, yeah, I made an impression of you. I was looking out the window as you're walking in. And I just happened to see you and your wife, and I was looking at how you're interacting with each other and talking. And I was looking at your walk and your gait and your posture and your pace. And I looked at your grooming. I looked at your attire. And I just took it all in. And I could just tell that you were in a good mood and that you were feeling well. And that's wonderful. Congratulations. So I thought, wow, they're always watching, aren't they? They're always watching, even when you don't know they're watching. And that goes for the labs too. The labs don't lie. You can tell them you're drinking your water, but if you're not, they know. You can tell them you're taking your medicine, but if you're not, they'll know. If you're on dialysis, they do talk to the dialysis centers. They know what's going on. So you better put yourself in the position to be your best self and present yourself in the happiest, most outgoing, most pleasant way that you can. You praise your nurses who help you so much. Thank your doctors for all that they do. The more you can show that you're doing well, you're in a good mood, you're keeping a good attitude, you're staying positive, you're remaining optimistic, and you're grateful, the more it will benefit you.
Okay. One of the things that you're famous for is the advice that you give to transplant list candidates and the tips that you give to them. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? They're all listed in the comments so people can see, but I'd like to get your take on it.
Okay. Well, I talked about presenting your best self. I think that's really important. Appreciate your providers, advocate for yourself, ask questions. I like to give the people in those training sessions inside information that they may not get from a doctor, like how things feel. Like I talked earlier about the incision. It may feel a little sore, may feel a little achy, may feel a little tingly, but nothing you can't deal with. I took hardly any pain medicine at all. I didn't need it. I like to alleviate their fears about that. For the men, one of the biggest fears, let's face it, is the stent removal. Not fun. The first time around back in 2000 was not great. I mean, I grit my teeth and withstood it. It felt kind of like a bee stinging you. That's how I would describe it. Just or an ant crawling up inside you. Not pleasant, and that took a little bit longer. That took maybe 5 minutes or so. I don't know why. But the second time around, in and out, a couple seconds, didn't even know what happened. And I looked over at the table and I saw the little stent they took out. And it had definitely decreased in size and thickness. It was more flexible than it was the first time. And the probe that they used to do it was much smaller and thinner than the first time around. And perhaps I had just a better provider doing it the second time around who was more experienced. I don't know. But it's not that big a deal. Don't stress out over things. I found that throughout this whole process, and I've been fighting this thing for a quarter century, nothing's ever as bad as what you imagine it to be. The pain associated with a kidney transplant and the incision and poking around inside you and the stretching you, and it's just not as bad as what you might imagine, at least for me. So I just like to mention those kinds of things because don't fear the unknown. It's not the doctors and nurses' first rodeo. It might be yours, but they know what they're doing. Have complete faith in them. Don't stress over things that may not be as bad as what your imagination may be telling you. So that's the kind of thing I like to get across to people. And then what I talked about earlier in being proactive and making things, don't wait for things to happen. Make them happen for yourself. Educate yourself and be willing to take an educated, calculated risk, such as a hepatitis C kidney. Some of the things they quantify as high-risk kidneys, you got a tattoo. High-risk kidney. You spent a night in jail. High-risk kidney. So, some of the things that they consider high risk are really pretty ridiculous. But nevertheless, that's the way that they classify them. So you can always refuse. You get a call and they say, "Oh, we've got hepatitis C kidney available for you. Do you want to go forward?" You can always say, "Oh, well, no, I think let's pass." And you're not penalized or hindered in any way. You just remain on the waiting list. You continue to accrue time until the next one comes along. And like I was alluding to before, don't take no for an answer. And that doctor wanted me to wait, have my dialysis, lose the fluid. Don't take no for an answer. Look, get a second opinion. Do your research. Do what you can do to make things happen for yourself. I let them know that you have to have in place a support system, be it a spouse, be it a sibling, a child, a parent, a friend, whoever it may be, because there will be times when you're tired or sore. You can't drive for the first month. You're going to have lots of appointments the first month. Someone's got to take you there. Someone may have to go pick up your medicine for you. Maybe you're a little bit tired, a little bit sore to prepare your own meal. So it'd be nice to have someone to prepare your real meal or bring one over for you. I had a couple of wonderful friends that helped me in that way, and I appreciate it to this day. You need to have your financial resources and insurance all squared away. Medicare doesn't pay 100%, so you want to make sure that you have some secondary insurance that can help pick up the balance. You do qualify for Medicare when you're a kidney transplant patient. You get Medicare for 3 years, and it pays for your immunosuppressants. But once that 3 years is over, that's it. You're going to have to pay for your medications, any portion at least that Medicare may not pay for, or that your private insurance may not pay for. So you have to have your finances and your insurance in place. Again, I've been so fortunate throughout this whole process, and that things happen for me in the right way at the right time, and just in time. I was 62 when I got my first transplant, and by the time I was 62. No, I take it back. Yeah, 62. And then I had my 3 years of kidney medication coverage for the immunosuppressants. And when it was about to run out after the 3 years, I turned 65. Bingo, age into regular Medicare. So my Part A, strike that. Part B Medicare paid for my immunosuppressants for the first 3 years and continued right on to this day, paying for my immunosuppressants at the normal 80%. I do have my supplement, which pays for the remainder. So I pay zero for my immunosuppressants. I've been very fortunate, very lucky. I know how lucky I am. Believe me, I know people out there have it a lot tougher than I have, which again just further motivates me to get out there and get the word out and help in any way anybody who's coming along behind me who may have any questions or wonder what it's like or what they might be able to learn from what I've learned.
Excellent. Excellent. I read recently that on February 7th, you had the Evershell shot. Can you tell us a little bit about the things you're doing to protect yourself from COVID?
Well, of course, I follow all the guidelines, and I'm a germaphobe. I use my hand sanitizer. I always mask up. I like the KN95 better than the N95. I just find it a little bit easier to breathe with that one. I don't think there's really much difference between the two, other than the straps. The straps are a little bit uncomfortable on the N95, I think. And I think the N95 is a little bit harder to breathe through. But if I feel the need, I'll wear my KN95 and double up with a regular surgical mask, just depending on the situation. So even though mask requirements have been lifted in our area, I still wear my mask out in public. I got all 3 of my shots, the 2 COVID shots and the booster vaccine. And again, very fortunate. Not many people get the Evershell monoclonal antibody treatment. It's approved for emergency use, but I was identified by my transplant center as someone who would qualify for that due to my high immunosuppression and the complications I've had. I had expressed my interest in going forward with it if it ever became available. So as soon as it became available, boom, they called me because they knew I was interested. And again, they knew my history. They knew I'd show up on time and do everything that I had to do and wouldn't waste the appointment, which has been known to happen. So far, so good. I have not had COVID. Unfortunately, my transplant center tells me they do not have a lab test yet to see if there's antibodies that have been developed from the Evershell monoclonal antibody treatment. But we have to assume that it's helping me and giving me some further protection because I really didn't have any COVID antibodies built up, even though I had 3 shots. So hopefully the Evershell will do the trick. I call that my butt booster. They give you 1 shot in each cheek.
Okay, we're in the home stretch here, Tom. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss before we close today? Is there anything I forgot to ask you that you'd like to discuss?
I think we've covered the whole situation pretty well, and it's just kidney disease is a tough disease, and so many people just don't really understand it or what the kidney does or the effect that the kidney can have on all the other organs in the body. It just doesn't seem to be taken as seriously as heart disease or cancer, the highly publicized diseases that seem to get all the attention and all the funding and all the fundraisers, races, and everything that's done to promote the awareness and fundraising for those high-profile diseases. But kidney disease is very prevalent in society. It's getting more so all the time because we're a very sedentary society. We eat a lot of things that are unhealthy for us. Diabetes is getting more prevalent all the time in the population. That and high blood pressure, hypertension are the 2 leading causes of kidney disease. And those are all getting worse in society at large, particularly with the African-American population. It hits very hard. So we just really need to continue to get the awareness out there. continue to promote organ donation, help people get over their fears. All religions, except maybe one or two. There's very few out there that don't support organ donation. It's just really important to overcome some of the fears or misconceptions that people have. They think, okay, well, if I list my willingness to donate an organ on my driver's license, then if something happens, I'm in an accident, I'm dying, and it doesn't look good for me, the doctors aren't going to work as hard for me to keep me alive because they know they want that organ. No. There's two separate medical teams, one for the patient who is the potential organ donor and one for the kidney patient or other organ patient who needs an organ donation. They're separate. They don't know about each other. They don't communicate with each other. Each transaction, if you will, is done completely separately. Boy, do I have a lot of respect for organ donors. You see and learn of people who proactively just volunteer to be a living organ donor and give to a complete stranger. It's one thing you give to your wife or you give to a friend or somebody you know, but to give to a complete stranger. And as I mentioned at the outset, we had one of those people in our PACT group. Boy, what a tremendous person that was. And he actually had hiked down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon 6 months after giving a kidney.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Tom, what a great job you did tonight of raising awareness and bringing up great points, educating all of us. I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking to us. I appreciate it very much, my friend.
Well, I hope some people may have learned a thing or two from what we talked about tonight. I want to thank you for inviting me, and hello to all my personal friends who might be out there watching me tonight. And let's just go out there and get the awareness out there for the need for organ donation. And if you're good at fundraising, that's something that can always be done. And I hope everybody is well and gets better. And I wish everybody great health for the coming years and beyond.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. You have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. Thanks again.
No worries. Appreciate it very much. All right, my friends. So what's coming up on Kidney Stories? We're going to have a busy March to honor National Kidney Month. So Charles R. Ricoeur on the 4th of March. The 9th of March, we rescheduled Colin Clifford. He's the 3-time transplant guy from Ireland. He had a bad storm. It knocked out the power. We had to reschedule. So we'll get that one clicked then. On the 10th, we're going to talk to Gwendolyn Westland. Jared can tell you Gwenny's a great guest, kidney advocate, having a rough time. We want to make sure we get the word out for her. 311, Stacy Brevicordi is going to be on. We're going to talk to her about her kidney story and her kidney advocacy. 318, we're going to talk to Dr. Henderson. She's going to teach us about kidneys and insomnia and what we can do to get over it. Your Uncle Jim and his 3 hours of sleep every night is looking forward to that conversation. 325, we're talking to Teresa Briggs. Teresa is a heart patient and a kidney transplant patient, got a beautiful daughter. A lot to talk about with Teresa. Expect to learn a lot during that broadcast. All right, my friends, that's the end of this one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.